At 7:03 a.m., my wife was still brushing her teeth when 911 tried to evict her from our own lake house. The dispatcher said her full name, called her an intruder, and told her officers were already on the way. I was holding a mug of coffee, staring at the phone on speaker, thinking, you just picked the worst possible woman to mess with. Because my wife isn't some random squatter, she runs the state police. The HOA president who made that call thought she was kicking out an unregistered tenant. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the one person who writes the playbook. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier what I wanted most in life, I would have told you quiet mornings, good coffee, and a place where the loudest thing I heard was the wind scraping through pine needles. My wife Rachel wanted the same, though she never said it out loud. When you run an entire state police force, you get used to carrying the weight of crises that never stop. She wore authority like body armor, calm, composed, unshakable, but at home I could see the toll. Some nights she'd sit on the edge of the bed staring at her uniform like it weighed 50 pounds more than the day before. So when she got promoted, we finally did it. We bought a lake cabin, a place to breathe. A place far from sirens, politics, and the constant grind of command. Lake Pine Estates looked like a postcard tall timber lining the water loons calling at dusk and sunsets that painted the lake gold. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. No meetings, no emergencies, no authority struggles. Well, you already know how that turned out. We pulled into the driveway that first weekend with groceries, fishing gear, and a playlist of old country songs humming through the truck. Rachel hopped out, smiling, humming something she'd been stuck on all week. For 15 whole seconds, it felt like peace might actually be possible. Then the Lexus arrived. White, shiny, slow-rolling like a shark circling new territory. Out stepped a woman who smelled like she'd bathed in department store perfume. Oversized sunglasses, pastel sweater wrapped around her shoulders, clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of honor. The kind of person who believed HOA authority, ranked somewhere between the Constitution and divine law. Her name was Karen, and yes, she embodied the stereotype in a way that felt almost committed. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even pretend to be neighborly. She walked straight past us and began inspecting our cabin like she was evaluating a crime scene. Rachel, bless her patience, tried to extend an olive branch. Hi there, can we help you with something? Karen didn't even pause. We've had unauthorized activity on this parcel. Need to confirm your status. Are you renters? Rachel wiped her hands on her jeans. No, we own this place. Karen squinted like she'd been told gravity wasn't real. I don't recognize you. Well, I said, stepping in, we closed last spring. I'm Dean. This is my wife, Rachel. Karen raised her eyebrows at wife, but pretended she didn't. I'm the HOA president, she declared like she expected us to salute. We require occupancy notices submitted through the official community portal. Let me tell you something about that portal. It looked like it had been built on a free trial version of WordPress during the Jurassic era. Half the pages were broken. The calendar displayed random dates from 2018, and somehow every other link was titled Final, Copy 3, Final, Really Final, PDF. Rachel didn't laugh, though I did. We weren't aware that was required for homeowners, she said. Karen clicked her pen the way a gunslinger might cock a revolver. Regardless, your names aren't on the ownership list. That's when it clicked. I'd purchased the cabin under my LLC for tax reasons. My name was on the deed, not Rachel's. Not a problem in any legal sense. But to Karen, it was fuel. She whipped out a printed notice in Comic Sans God Help Us, informing us we were required to vacate the cabin until she could verify residency. Rachel looked at it, then handed it back. No thanks. I don't take orders from you. Karen looked at her like Rachel had just kicked her lawn gnome, and from that moment we were on Karen's radar, the worst place a person can be. What followed were citations so absurd they belonged in a sitcom. Natural debris, accumulation, 3 pine cones. Excessive porch occupancy, Rachel drinking coffee. A formal notice accusing Rachel of unauthorized cohabitation. Each note taped aggressively to our door or mailbox. By then, we already knew the truth. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about community. This was a woman desperate to feel powerful, and she'd picked the wrong house to wage a war against. The morning Karen finally pulled the pin and threw a metaphorical grenade into our quiet lake weekend started with a sound I'd heard 1,000 times, my wife brushing her teeth. Mint foam, electric toothbrush, humming the usual. Then her phone lit up with an urgent dispatch call on speaker no less while I was pouring coffee. Ma'am, we've received a 911 report that a woman named Rachel Merritt is unlawfully occupying a residence at Lake Pine Estates. Officers are en route for removal. Rachel spit into the sink and turned to me, toothpaste still on her lip. Honey, Apparently, I'm illegally living in our own house. If I hadn't been half awake, I might have choked. There was only one person, bold, bored, and unhinged enough to weaponize 911 like a toddler with matches: Karen. And as we would soon learn, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The blue lights flickering through the trees looked surreal, like confused party decorations. 2 patrol cars rolled into our driveway at a crawl, the officers stepping out, with the caution of people expecting a genuine threat and finding a couple in pajamas instead. Rachel opened the door before they even knocked. "Good morning," she said calmly. "I understand someone reported me for trespassing in my own cabin." The younger officer blinked like his brain had blue-screened. "Ma'am, we got a report that you refused to vacate when told by the HOA president." Rachel crossed her arms. "I refused to leave my breakfast." The officers scanned the cabin, the fishing rods by the door, grocery bags, Rachel's half-sliced apple on the counter. Nothing said criminal. Everything said Saturday morning. Then came the moment the younger officer read Rachel's full name again and froze. "Ma'am, just to confirm, you're Commander Merritt." Rachel nodded. Both officers straightened like someone had yanked invisible strings. One removed his hat. The other tripped over an apology so fast he forgot his words. Rachel didn't milk it. She simply tapped the security feed onto our TV. There was Karen creeping around our porch, photographing our recycling bin, measuring our firewood, stretching a tape measure across our doormat, whispering to herself like she was compiling evidence for a Netflix documentary titled "The Case of the Criminal Pine Cones." The older officer murmured, "That's trespassing." "And misuse of emergency services," Rachel said, since she filed a knowingly false 911 report. The officers looked at each other. "Commander, do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," Rachel said. "But I want every call involving this address documented. From now on." They filled out the paperwork like their lives depended on it, apologized 3 separate times, then asked if we wanted extra patrols. Rachel declined. "I don't need protection. I need documentation." And that was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a storm building. The next day, Karen's Lexus slithered past our cabin twice. Slow, deliberate, predatory. "She's checking if the cops hauled me away," Rachel murmured. By noon, the HOA board received an all-caps email from Karen accusing Rachel of threatening leadership, refusing mandated inspections. Hostile environmental presence, still not sure what that means. She attached a blurry screenshot of Rachel jogging, labeled "loitering in Comic Sans." I laughed. Rachel didn't. "She's escalating," she said quietly. "People like her don't stop until something breaks." The board scheduled a special session, which was HOA language for "we're scared of Karen but pretending we're not." Rachel insisted on going alone. Even through the cheap clubhouse walls, I heard Karen squawking like an offended rooster. She mocked my authority. She refused inspection. She is not a legal resident. Then Rachel's voice, calm as winter frost. "I am co-executive of the LLC on the deed. And also, since this seems relevant, I run the state police. If you intend to escalate further, you're welcome to present your claims in an actual courtroom." Silence. The kind you can taste. Rachel returned to the truck and simply said, "They postponed the vote. They're giving her rope." 2 nights later, we returned from dinner to find the front door slightly open. Not kicked in, not forced, just intentionally ajar. Inside, a framed photo of us turned face down. The drawer with Rachel's off-duty badge pulled open. A coat draped over a chair instead of its hook. Not theft. Message. Rachel said 2 words. She escalated. Then she called it in a formal incident report. Calm, cold, surgical. The next morning, a drone hovered 6 feet from our bedroom window, buzzing like a mechanical hornet. Its camera blinked red, recording. I yanked the curtain. It tilted toward me like it recognized my face. Rachel didn't look up from her laptop. She wants a reaction. Don't give her one. Instead, Rachel forwarded the break-in footage to state agencies. Then, she made one decisive phone call. "Yes, I'd like to file a formal investigation into misuse of HOA emergency access keys and unlawful surveillance." Karen had used a master key, one meant for emergencies only. That was the moment everything shifted. An hour later, she showed up at our porch with the most nervous lawyer I'd ever seen, Stephen, a man who looked like his suit was borrowed and his career held together by gum. "We're issuing a cease and desist," he declared shakily. Rachel raised one finger. "Stephen, do you know who I am?" He did not, but the moment she said Commander Merritt, he almost combusted. Karen shrieked. "Her authority means nothing here." Rachel played drone footage. break-in footage, trespass footage. Then she held out her hand. The controller. Handed over. Karen hesitated and obeyed. The sound of the drone powering down might as well have been a guillotine. That evening, Judge Halford personally called Rachel. "Rachel, Karen filed an emergency injunction trying to have you removed as a threat to neighborhood safety." He sighed. "It reads like she dictated it while sprinting." He dismissed it immediately, but he warned she's going nuclear, and he was right. The next morning, 2 black state-issued SUVs rolled up our dirt road logos of the State Ethics and Law Review Division gleaming on the doors. These were not HOA-level authorities. These were the people who dismantled corruption, Commander Merritt, one investigator said. "We're initiating a formal inquiry into abuses of power by your HOA president." And that was the moment everything turned. Not with shouting, not with chaos, but with quiet, devastating consequences. Karen had wanted escalation. Congratulations. She had just invited the state. The thing about justice is that when it finally arrives, it doesn't knock politely. It shows up in black SUVs with tinted windows, steps out in tailored suits, and carries briefcases that look heavier than most HOA bylaws. That morning, as Rachel and I stood on our porch, 2 investigators from the State Ethics and Law Review Division approached with the calm seriousness of people who deal with real threats, not pine cone citations. Commander Merritt, the taller one, said, offering a folder. "We're initiating a formal inquiry into allegations of community leadership abuse, false legal filings, and misuse of emergency services by a member of your HOA." I swear the pines stopped rustling just to listen. Rachel accepted the folder with a nod as steady as ever. "We'll cooperate fully." They interviewed both of us for hours. Timeline reviews, evidence collection questions, about 911 misuse drone footage, even Karen's pattern of fabricated violations against neighbors. When they left, they shook Rachel's hand like she'd just handed them the key to a vault of misconduct. By noon, the HOA board was in meltdown. My inbox exploded with messages dripping with panic. "We had no idea Karen escalated this far. We want to cooperate with investigators immediately. Should we suspend her? We always supported fairness and transparency." Bold-faced lie. They'd supported silence. Karen, of course, sent one sentence. "This is a misunderstanding. I will resolve it personally." Rachel read it and let out a quiet, humorless laugh. She thinks this is still about her authority. That afternoon, the state issued a temporary suspension notice. It was taped to Karen's door with all the formality of a government hammer dropping on a paper kingdom, neighbors whispered. Kids stopped riding bikes near her house. Even her Lexus looked embarrassed. But Rachel wasn't done. Rather than letting the HOA crumble and reset under the same flawed structure, Rachel called for what she called a community conversation, not a meeting, not a vote, not a formal session, just a gathering at the old dock by the lake. No titles, no clipboards, no power plays. 20 neighbors came, some curious, some scared, all exhausted. Thermoses in hand-folding chairs, squeaking on the wooden planks. The sunset painted the water orange as Rachel stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point fingers. She didn't grandstand. She told the truth. Calmly, plainly, she laid out everything Karen had done. The 911 misuse. The fabricated notices. The break-in. The drone weaponizing insurance and zoning false financial accusations sent to a neighbor. The master. Emergency key. The emergency court filing. The attempt to portray residents as unstable. The pattern going back years. Every word landed heavier than the last. People stared in stunned silence, not because they didn't believe it, but because they finally saw the full picture. Every complaint they'd brushed off, every uneasy feeling, every subtle intimidation suddenly made sense. Then Rachel said something that shifted the air. "It's not enough to remove someone like her. We have to build a system that won't let another Karen take her place. This community doesn't need enforcers. It needs guardians." Heads nodded. Some people actually clapped. Vince, the neighbor she'd defended, wiped his eyes. Greg, the treasurer, looked like he was witnessing a second coming. By the next morning, a petition had circulated not to punish Karen, but to dismantle the entire HOA leadership structure and rebuild it with term limits, oversight, transparent complaints, legal accountability, multi-signature, and inspections, and a code of conduct with actual teeth. 70 signatures arrived in a single day. The vote passed by a landslide. Every board member except Greg resigned immediately. And for the first time since we arrived, Lake Pine Estates felt hopeful. But tyrants don't go quietly. 3 days later, Rachel found an alarming filing. Karen had submitted paperwork to form a brand new HOA in a half-built development 20 minutes away under a modified name. Karen Cassandra Pinebrook became Cassandra R. Keene. Same woman, same delusions, new kingdom. Rachel didn't even flinch. She's not giving up authority, she said. She's trying to reinvent it. That night, she compiled the evidence, filed a state injunction, and triggered a fraud review protocol tied to Karen's misconduct. The next morning, the state froze Karen's application. Her new kingdom collapsed before she ever crowned herself. A week later, the final ruling came in. Karen, under any variation of her name, was permanently barred from holding leadership or enforcement roles in any HOA neighborhood board co-op or community compliance position statewide. The investigator summarized it simply: she abused power so thoroughly she'll never be allowed near power again. And just like that, the storm ended not with fireworks, but with paperwork powerful enough to shut down an empire of pettiness forever. But the true ending, the one no one expected, was still coming. When the official notice arrived, stamped, signed, and sealed by the State Licensing Commission, it didn't feel like victory. Not the loud kind, anyway. It felt quiet, clean, like someone had finally opened a window after months of stale air. Rachel read the document, once her expression steady. Then she folded it with the same precision she used to fold her uniform shirts and slipped it into the back of her file drawer. Permanent bar from community leadership. All legal name variations included. Statewide enforcement. Karen hadn't just lost the battle. She had lost the throne she'd tried to build twice. For the first time since we'd bought the cabin, I believed we were truly done with her. The days that followed were the kind we thought we'd have from the beginning. Mornings on the porch. Coffee without checking the window. Walks by the lake instead of to the mailbox, expecting another fake violation. Rachel finally relaxed into the peace she had earned 10 times over. But peace after trauma isn't automatic. It settles, slowly filling the cracks one breath at a time. I noticed it in the little things. The way Rachel no longer paused at every crunch of gravel. The way I no longer checked our porch camera before bed. The way neighbors came back to life, laughing at mailboxes, chatting across yards, baking cookies, instead of whispering about surveillance drones. The community healed because the fear was gone, and Rachel had given them something better in its place: structure, fairness, and the confidence that someone was finally watching out for everyone, not just protecting her own power. Even Greg changed. He became someone you could trust, someone who learned the cost of silence. He and Rachel worked together on the new HOA charter, term limits, ethics clauses, multi-signature inspections, no more secret master keys, no more single-person rule over the neighborhood. She guided, advised, corrected, but refused to lead. That's who she was. She didn't want a crown. She wanted accountability. One evening, weeks later, we sat on the dock again. The lake was still, the moon spread silver across the water, and the world felt as if someone had smoothed all its rough edges. Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. She looked softer than I'd seen her since the day we bought the cabin. "Think she'll try again?" I asked quietly. Rachel shook her head. "Not here. Somewhere else. No," she said, and her voice carried that quiet certainty that once made rookies stand straighter at briefing. People who build their identity on power never expect consequences. And once those consequences catch up, they spend the rest of their life running from them. I let that sink in. Karen wasn't a villain who needed defeating. She was a warning, a reminder of what happens when someone clings to control so tightly they forget why rules exist in the first place. The lake rippled gently. Fireflies blinked in the trees. Rachel exhaled long and slow, like she was finally releasing the last of the tension she'd been carrying. "You know, I said you didn't just stop her. You fixed the entire system." Rachel gave a faint smile. "I didn't fix anything. I just reminded people what justice looks like." And she meant it. Weeks turned into a month. The new HOA charter rolled out smoothly. The community felt lighter. Vince returned to baking bread on weekends. The twin boys, 2 cabins over, finally rode their bikes without glancing nervously at Karen's old house. Even Linda used her binoculars for actual bird watching now. Then one afternoon, while grabbing our mail, I found a single envelope with no stamp, no return address. My stomach twisted before my brain even registered why. Same handwriting. Slanted. Angry. Too familiar. I handed it to Rachel. She opened it slowly, cautiously, then exhaled in relief. Inside wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't even an attempt to rise again. It was a photocopy of Karen's final denial. Her last door closing. No note, no signature. Just acceptance. Rachel tucked it into her files, closed the drawer, and didn't reopen it. That night, we walked down to the dock again. The lake was quiet, the wind soft, the stars bright enough to see their reflections dancing on the water. Rachel rested her hand over mine. "She's gone," I said. Rachel nodded. "She'll try to rebuild somewhere. But not with power. Never again." We sat there for a long time listening to the lake breathe. For the first time in months, peace didn't feel temporary. It felt earned, solid, real. And maybe that's the real ending, not the investigation, not the suspension, not the statewide ban. The real ending is this. We came to Lake Pine Estates looking for quiet. We found chaos. But in the end, we built something stronger than the storm that tried to swallow us. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't shout or gloat. It settles soft, steady, unshakable. Just like the lake at night. And somewhere out there, Karen finally understood the truth. She spent her life avoiding power built on fear always collapses. But power built on integrity never has to shout. And if you've ever dealt with your own HOA nightmare, your own Karen, your own brush with petty authority, just know this. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand your ground.